It is the meat and potatoes of the NFL draft, the time in which teams across the NFL, the 32 teams, bulk up the roster, look for depth, look for those positional players that will fill needs toward winning championships. The stars are drafted on day one for the most part, and of course, there are going to be some finds, some diamonds in the rough, some guys that did not make it into the first round, but will become NFL stars. But for the most part, in rounds 2, 3, and 4, again, we're talking about players that will fill up the rosters, will play integral roles on the NFL teams. And this is the bulk of roster development and roster quantity in the NFL, rounds 2, 3, and 4. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, bringing you our coverage of the NFL draft in our instant analysis. Of course, we joined you, that is, last night following round 1. If you have not caught that video, please check out the channel and go through our conversation with you, the smart fan, the hardcore college football fan, and NFL fan, as we dissected round number 1. And we'll dive into rounds 2, 3, and 4 and look ahead, of course, with your help, to rounds 5, 6, and 7 on Saturday. All right, let's run down the picks on this Friday night, and I will give you my analysis as we go. I didn't take notes. I didn't really lock in. I had it on. I was watching, but I just, for the most part, I was working on some other things regarding the channel, but I was certainly in tune with the picks. And there's a number of picks, as you well know, if you watch me on a regular basis here. I cover the Power 5 primarily, the Group of 5 secondarily. So when somebody is drafted from Sioux Falls, I have no idea. I do not prepare for the NFL draft specifically. So if you're going to ask NFL draft questions about team needs in the NFL, this is not the guy. This is not your guy. I'll certainly let you comment as you call it 860-325-3687. And before we jump on day 2 and round number 2, of course, need to let you know that you can support the channel. So it is my service to you to let you know how you can keep this going, how you can keep the content better than ever, and better than anywhere else you can find online, with the best discussion, debate, and analysis from myself and top guests, broadcasters, bloggers, and writers. You can do that by grabbing the Amazon link that you will find in the description section of any of the videos. Go to any of the videos and find the description section under the video. Grab the Amazon link and shop at Amazon using that link, and you help support the channel. I will take calls in just a few minutes. So whomever's calling, hang on. So it's most important here that you help support the channel by liking the videos, sharing the videos, commenting to the videos in the live chat, and of course, subscribing. And then get your friends, your family, your social media acquaintances involved, and bring them here to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And again, do your Amazon shopping. I understand that Amazon is a fairly large and powerful company, from what I understand. A lot of people like to use that Amazon to do their shopping. So grab the link there, and it helps support the channel. Doesn't cost you an extra penny, but helps support Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Join us on Patreon. We will have exclusive content available there. I believe I will start sometime this week in providing my response to viewer comments over on Patreon. So that should be a big time and a fun time. And we've got a handful of people already that have trusted me, and I greatly appreciate. I cannot express, although I have expressed to them exclusively in an exclusive live stream, how much I appreciate the trust that they have placed in me by joining me at Patreon in our exclusive little group there. That is going to be a rather large group very soon. I am going to comment to the viewer comments, and I'm going to do that over on Patreon. And we're going to have some free merchandise available there as well. So that should be a whole lot of fun. If you enjoy the audio, or you know a number of people, family, friends, social media acquaintances who do not have time or don't like to watch videos, but take in the podcast style, the audio podcast, then of course you can direct them to Google Play, Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify for Mark Rogers TV. Just search Mark Rogers TV. All right, let's go through round 2, and then we'll take some calls. Round 2, here we go. And I'll let you know what I think of these players. Round 2, pick number 1, Arizona Cardinals State cornerback Byron Murphy from Washington. Really good player, had a good combine. I've seen him play a whole lot of football. And yes, that seems to be a strong selection by the Arizona Cardinals, who were weak in the pass defense game. Byron Murphy goes to Arizona. Then we've got Rock Ya-Sin from Temple, another cornerback, as we saw a rarity in the NFL draft these days with the proliferation of the passing game. Of course, you've got to stop the pass, and you need quality cornerback play and safety play and guys that can line up in the slot and take those guys on and cover downfield. And typically we've seen value at cornerback in the first round of the NFL draft, but not this year. We saw the bulk of players, not elite top-end players, but a run on cornerbacks and safeties, specifically corners, in the second and third rounds. So the run starts with Byron Murphy, and then to the Indianapolis Colts, Rock Ya-Sin from Temple. Didn't watch a whole lot of Temple football. I saw the Owls play a few quarters against Maryland in their demolition of the Terps, and then I also saw a close game that went down to the wire against Duke in the bowl game, but there wasn't anything in particular that Rock Ya-Sin did. It was impressive to see his wrestling video. So this guy is not afraid to mix it up. Has kind of this opposite scouting report as Greedy Williams, who picks and chooses and decides when he will invest in making a little contact and putting a shoulder into a tackle, or if he's going to play bullfighter, ole. Rock Ya-Sin, though, at the same time, is the complete opposite. And we saw it on the game tape. And of course, he's got a wrestling background, so he can grab you and bring you to the dirt. At pick number 3 in the second round, we've got Jacksonville taking Jawan Taylor from Florida. David Waters from Gators Breakdown certainly saw that one coming. He shot a segment this week for Jacksonville Television, and also let us know a few weeks ago that Jawan Taylor most likely would be selected by Jacksonville, and so he was, the Florida tackle, at number 3. Although there were a number of comments made on ESPN by Todd McShay in particular that Jawan Taylor didn't dominate up front as you would have expected him, and played a little bit lazy. Pick number 4, Deebo Samuel, San Francisco wide receiver, of course, out of South Carolina. Deebo, an electric kick returner. 2 seasons ago, scored 4 touchdowns in the return game and a wideout on big pass plays in the first 3 games before he was injured. He was severely missed. And, of course, Deebo Samuel again came back and had a nice season this year. He's a physical guy, not a tall guy, but a physical wide receiver. And he has polished up his game, and he's a really good player. Carolina with the 5th pick, Greg Little, Ole Miss offensive tackle, left tackle, who was the number 1 rated player in the country coming out of high school and did not live up to that billing, replacing Laramie Tunsil, who was the number 1 player in the country as a left tackle going to Ole Miss under not necessarily what were considered at the time to be scrupulous means by one Hugh Freeze at Ole Miss, but Greg Little maybe under that same regime as he entered the program at Ole Miss. I'll take some calls in just a minute. So Greg Little, again, going to Carolina after underachieving at Ole Miss, and he was not a dominant left tackle. He was really good, and obviously Ole Miss is, or the Carolina Panthers are seeing what Greg Little provided Ole Miss and the rest of the nation, as he was rated the number 1 prospect at his position and overall coming into college football. All right, Cody Ford. Now you take it from a Greg Little who underachieved to a Cody Ford who was an All-American tackle at Oklahoma, goes to the Buffalo Bills with pick number 6. We got Tampa Bay taking Sean Bunting, cornerback from Central Michigan. His tape looked really good. I can't really speak to his play out of the MAC, of course, as I don't watch a whole lot of MAC football. That's basically a Tuesday or Wednesday night routine for many of us, but I typically don't catch it. At number 8, we've got Oakland taking in Trayvon McMullen. Trayvon Mullen from Clemson, cornerback, of course, for the national champions. Denver, 9th pick. Dalton Reisner, tackle out of Kansas State, not an overly athletic guy. Probably won't play left tackle, maybe switch to guard, but a road grader for Kansas State in that powerful running game for Bill Snyder in the Wildcats. Then Denver went back-to-back, and this time they went with Drew Lock. And so Drew Lock, they said it during the broadcast, and I made mention of it a couple of times to different people this week, that Drew Lock reminded me of John Elway, not in regards to that powerful of an arm, not an all-decade, all-generational kind of player, but the big build, the 6'4", the broad shoulders, stands tall in the pocket, can take off and run with it, played basketball, was actually drafted or recruited heavily on the basketball side coming out of high school. Drew Lock to Denver. A lot of the analysts really liked Drew Lock over Daniel Jones and possibly even Dwayne Haskins, but Drew Lock fell to pick number 10 in the second round to Denver. We'll keep an eye on that for generations. Again, the quarterback groups kind of get evaluated together. NFL fans years down the road remember who the quarterbacks were that were drafted in the same year and how did they fare. So it's going to be Dwayne Haskins, Kyler Murray, Drew Lock, and Daniel Jones, and we'll see on down the line with a Ryan Finley in particular and some other quarterbacks who have yet to be drafted. I know the analysts, Todd McShay in particular, very high on Ryan Finley. I wasn't so high on Ryan Finley. He's got a high IQ and he understands and grasps the game. I don't think he's a top-end talent, and McShay loves him. But me in particular, I don't get paid to do that sort of thing. But Ryan Finley never necessarily impressed me with the throws that he could make down the field. All right, at pick 11 in the second round, we got Detroit and Jelani Tavai out of Hawaii, linebacker, and of course, group of 5 play. I've probably seen him play splash here and a splash there, but didn't recognize or notice him in particular. All right, at pick number 12, we've got Green Bay and Eljon Jenkins, the center from Mississippi State. Probably a bit of a reach for the Packers there, from what I understand. The New England Patriots went next with Juwan Williams, cornerback from Vandy. Really good player who can catch, in particular, at this position in the draft, more of a slot receiver, man-to-man guy. Every time the Patriots select, you've got to think, okay, even if this guy seems to be a reach for any other team, they must have a mission for this guy, and they must have a specific role for him that they really like him because they typically know what they're doing. So the Cleveland Browns next went with the best to cover corner in the draft, Greedy Williams out of LSU. And again, it was a bit surprising, as they mentioned during the analysis, that the Cleveland Browns were one of the poorer teams in the NFL in yards after catch, and poor tackling led to that. And here they get another not willing tackler in Greedy Williams out of LSU. All right, next we've got Marquise Blair out of Utah, safety, who laid the lumber. I saw Marquise Blair play a number of times at Utah in the Pac-12 as they went to the championship game and played Northwestern in the Holiday Bowl. And Marquise Blair is going to be a force for the Seattle Seahawks, as, of course, they have majored in recent years on great secondary play. Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman, and the like. New Orleans 6 take Eric McCoy, the center out of Texas A&M, who had impressive tape. Definitely what we saw tonight. Ben Banigou out of TCU, a highly productive player who performed better at the Senior Bowl workouts, and at the combine than was expected. And that certainly raised his stock as he goes to Indianapolis in round 2. Minnesota goes with Irv Smith, the tight end out of Alabama, who we've seen in recent playoffs and national championship games and during the SEC season, who almost can play a Jimmy Graham kind of role, in which he was able to do that in the new style Alabama offense, not so much the old style under Jalen Hurts, but in the new style, space them out and go 4 wides and then use the tight end when it's an Irv Smith. That he was able to do that, and he goes to Minnesota. Of course, as soon as he was announced, it actually had not clicked for a long time in watching Irv Smith play for the Tide that his father, it then clicked before they started to show the tape. Oh, yeah, Irv Smith. Of course, we remember him with the New Orleans Saints, played 7 seasons with the Saints in the 1990s. At pick number 19 in the second round, we've got A.J. Brown, the first Ole Miss wide receiver of the 2 that came off the board to Tennessee. A.J. Brown, more consistent, more productive, more reliable for Ole Miss. DK Metcalf had the measurables. A.J. Brown will probably play a slot receiver, doesn't quite have the lean or the well, when you saw the shot of both of those guys in the 6-packs or the 12-packs or the 28-packs, it was tough to separate them. But in terms of the scouting report, A.J. Brown considered more of an inside guy and DK Metcalf an outside guy. Cincinnati goes with Drew Sample, the tight end out of Washington. Don't remember really seeing him flash when I watched Washington play, and I saw the Huskies play a number of times last year, specifically against I saw the Washington State game. I saw the bowl game against Ohio State. I saw the Pac-12 championship game against Utah. I saw the Auburn game, those games in particular, and don't remember Drew Sample for Washington really doing much of anything in those games. And again, we give it from the college angle, not the scouting tape. Philadelphia, 21 in the second round, takes Miles Sanders, the running back out of Penn State. He's shifty. He can stop on a dime. He's quick, probably quicker than fast. He is fast, but he's not top-end fast. And I always am amused when players coming out of college are criticized for not having top-end speed, and there's very few of those guys. I saw a graphic during the NFL Scouting Combine this year in which they looked at the 5 or 6 most productive wide receivers in the NFL currently. A.J. Green, Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, all those guys ran like 4.65s. It was amazing. Now guys get criticized for running 4.45s, and the best wide receivers in the NFL were running at their best, at their healthiest in their careers to start their NFL career, were running in the 4.65 range, 4.58s, 4.62s, in that range, and they're doing just fine. And they're probably not as fast now as 28 years old as they were when they were 22 years old. All right. So Miles Sanders had some fumbling issues. His per carry fumbling average, the highest among anybody drafted this year or eligible to be drafted at running back. Keep that in mind. Houston goes with Lonnie Johnson, a very interesting prospect out of Kentucky, cornerback who was originally signed by Ohio State. He played a number of years of junior college. So his collegiate signing goes all the way back to 2013. He played something like 3 years of JUCO ball. He signed a second time at Iowa State. Couldn't stay on the field, couldn't make the grades, has had a number of learning issues as reported, and finally caught on with Kentucky and played and started 18 games for the Wildcats and was highly productive. And he's a freak athlete. That could be a steal for the Houston Texans, taking Lonnie Johnson out of Kentucky. The Texans had back-to-back picks, and they went with Max Sharping, the tackle out of Northern Illinois. And because of my lack of watching Northern Illinois football, except for if they play the big boys in the non-conference games like Florida State, Utah, and Iowa, as they did this past season. And then also, of course, they did play the bowl game, in which I watched all the bowl games for the most part. But I'm not picking out tackles for Northern Illinois during the bowl game. So Max Sharping, we understand, must be a pretty good player to be drafted in the mid-second round by the Houston Texans. All right, Nicole Hardman, a guy that we saw play plenty of football, of course, at Georgia in high-profile, high-prestige games for the Bulldogs, a very explosive player to Kansas City. Of course, they are fearing the worst when it comes to Tyreek Hill, and all the information, all the videotape, all the tape recordings, I should say, that have come out of Kansas City's camp and out of that investigation are very disturbing. So aside from the football, yes, we're going to miss seeing Tyreek Hill play, but he has much, 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 much more serious issues to deal with in life that far exceed football. Philadelphia, pick number 25 in the second round, goes with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. We saw an interview last night before the NFL draft with David Shaw, who was, of course, touting his players. So I did not expect him to be able to necessarily project any negatives on his own guys, like a Bryce Love in particular, he was asked about, and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who was a tremendous red zone threat because of his height, the long arms, basketball player, very physical guy, physical receiver who gets his hands on the DBs and pretty much has his way. A guy that's going to be able to, go to the corners, go to the fades, and outfight defenders for the football and high point the football. Arcega-Whiteside out of Stanford going to the Philadelphia Eagles. At pick number 26, we've got Dallas taking Tristan Hill, offensive tackle from Central Florida. Indianapolis, Paris Campbell, Ohio State Buckeyes. And of course, Paris Campbell probably made some money once Dwayne Haskins took over the quarterback job at Ohio State from JT Barrett. And Paris Campbell is an elite runner, playmaker, can run the jet sweep, not great ball skills for a wide receiver. Decent ball skills, but a very fine wide receiver. I expect him to have a productive NFL career, and he gets to play on the carpet with Andrew Luck in Indianapolis. The Los Angeles Chargers, as we round out the second round here, took Nasir Adderley out of Delaware, a safety. Of course, we don't watch the Blue Hens play, but it was interesting to note that, of course, he is related to the great Herb Adderley, one of the great corners in the history of the NFL, with 5 Super Bowl and NFL championships with the Packers and the Dallas Cowboys. At pick number 21-9, we've got the Los Angeles Rams taking Taylor Rapp, safety, Washington, and the Washington Huskies, probably outside of LSU, Ohio State. I don't know. After those two schools, they've probably represented themselves in the secondary as well as anybody in the country over the past 5 years. Probably Alabama, Ohio State, LSU, I would guess, have outperformed Washington, but that's it in the secondary. And Taylor Rapp, from the time he stepped on campus at Washington, was a prime performer in the Pac-12, was the defensive freshman of the year at Washington, and he goes to the Rams. Arizona, with a second pick in the second round, takes Andy Isabella. We heard a whole lot of him out of UMass as a wide receiver, very quick and fast player who really showed out at the combine and rose his draft stock. Of course, we're not going to see too many UMass players drafted, period, let alone as high as pick number 30 in the second round, which should be about pick 62. And then the final 2 picks of the second round, one, Thornhill, a player that I really like, have always liked out of Virginia. Playmaker, ball hawk, hard-hitting safety. Again, out of Virginia, goes to Kansas City as the Chiefs try to improve their defense. And then the final pick of the second round is DK Metcalf. We talked about A.J. Brown being drafted a little bit earlier than DK, who received a little bit more fanfare from what I could gather after this season. The Ole Miss wide receiver DK Metcalf goes to Seattle. All right, I'll open up the phone lines 860-325-3687, and also I will check out the live chat. Let's do it. Now no one calls. All right. We got Deeper Rod on the line. We've got, what's up, Deeper Rod? Pretty disappointed no Longhorns get drafted yet. All right. We got a phone call coming in. And of course, I'm the voice of college football. This is Mark Rogers TV. Who's on the line?
It's Deeper Rod. How's it going, Mark?
I'm great. What's going on, man?
Yeah, so it's been a little bit of a disappointing draft for not only Texas, but I'd say a good chunk of the Big 12. I was a little shocked to see Will Greer actually drafted so late. And David Sills, I don't know if you followed West Virginia football.
Absolutely.
I guess. But David Sills, man, he was widely considered the second best, in many cases, almost the best wide receiver in the Big 12 in the last year. And all of these wide receivers have been taken ahead of him. I mean, I understand, Marquise Brown is obviously a first-round pick, probably better than Sills, but to not see him even drafted after the third round, I mean, I think that's a little shocking. There's been a lot of negative attention, lately on Texas not having any draft picks this particular draft in the first two days at least. But I think a lot of that is very much reflective of the past struggles in the Texas program from the Charlie Strong era. I mean, the class that graduated this particular, senior cycle at Texas was part of Charlie Strong's recruiting classes and his development. And I think this is the first time also in Texas history that we haven't seen a player from Texas being drafted in the first round for 4 years straight. Texas has, in one way, shape, or form, had a first-round pick at least once every few years, but it hasn't happened in the last 4 years. So I think that, it's a good wake-up call for obviously Texas and Texas fans, Texas program in general. But we were hoping to see Charles Omenihu, who's like the first-team Big 12 linebacker, defensive back linebacker, I think, and he wasn't drafted. So big hopes for tomorrow for us, at least, from Longhorn Nation, but also for like a Big 12 supporter in general. I mean, we're hoping to see some more names. It's good to see the Iowa State guy being called. But other than that, man, he's a running back out of Iowa State, Montgomery.
Yes.
It's good to see his name, being called out. I think that was very encouraging. And there was no surprises as far as like the Big 12 is concerned that Oklahoma had its entire offensive line pretty much being drafted, and obviously Kyler Murray being the superstar quarterback and Marquise Brown being the wide receiver. So I guess it's props to Oklahoma. I'm going to say it, even though I am a Texas fan, diehard Texas fan and alum. But it is what it is, and kind of got to suck it up and hopefully hope for better in the coming day.
Well, what I find interesting, Deeper Rod, is that I try to. It's impossible to do this completely, but I try to separate what I see with my eyes versus what I read. Meaning that all of us watch college football. We know what we see and who we believe to be really good and project to the next level versus who we think is possibly marginal or would not relate to NFL style of play. And when it comes to line play, it's difficult to do that because we're not breaking down game tape. We're not rewatching the games and watching the left guard or the right tackle. We're watching the ball. And so, of course, some of the most important players are playing positions in which we're not necessarily, I go through these games and I go through these players. And sure, I watched Washington play 5 or 6 times last year, but was I really locked on Byron Murphy's play? So I separate what I see versus then the scouting reports. And I think many of us, and this makes sense, hear what the analysts have to say prior to the draft, and we read up on who's supposed to be good and who's supposed to be not as good. And when I think of Big 12 wide receivers, if I just think of the complete package of Big 12 wide receivers, the two that we saw in particular in Jennings and Sills at West Virginia, Marquise Brown in particular, obviously at Oklahoma, then you've got, actually, if I just went by what I see, and who impressed me in the probably 5 to 6 games that I've seen him over the past 2 years, that would be Hakeem Butler. He would be the guy. Now, once you apply the scouting reports and what the analysts say, they tell you that Marquise Brown is the best wide receiver, and then the other 2 West Virginia wide receivers might be in there at some point. But I was always impressed with Butler.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, right? I mean, David Sills, man. I mean, he had a very good career at West Virginia. I don't want to say he was like a superstar with the Big 12, but I mean, God, man, like I just think that he got robbed. I mean, people say that he was projected to be.
He got robbed? How are any of these guys getting robbed?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't mean to be argumentative. This is the way I'm stating it, is that it's a draft. And regardless of how anybody produced at the collegiate level, it's these teams, it's their mission, their purpose to determine how it relates to the NFL in the next level. And regardless of how good they were or how productive, they're going to select the player that they believe is going to be better and is going to fit the NFL system better. And of course, when we compare Hakeem Butler to the 2 West Virginia wide receivers, you talk about having a disadvantage. He had a linebacker throwing to him 2 years ago. And then Brock Purdy stepped in and elevated the position this past year and a half. But Hakeem Butler did not have Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield throwing to him the last 2 years.
Yeah,
or Will Greer.
I completely agree with you, and more importantly, right? I mean, like you said it yourself too. A lot of it is fit too. A lot of these NFL teams, a lot of the players that we like in college, we would think of as like pretty good players in general, maybe even the best among the ones that could be drafted. It's up to the NFL teams to kind of find a fit, and a lot of these NFL teams, I mean, are run like corporations. They're run like businesses. As a matter of fact, they are businesses. They're for-profit businesses. So if you're not going to be a personal fit in that locker room, I mean, people may not want to pick you. Or if there's not enough space in your team for that particular position, then there's probably no reason to have you, period. So I guess it was an interesting draft. I mean, I personally, I'm a little, I wouldn't say upset, but it would have been nicer to see some more guys picked that obviously I would have liked. But nonetheless, man, I mean, I think the biggest story of this entire draft will always be that Duke quarterback being picked number 6. I think nobody on planet Earth, and I mean nobody, had him going number 6. Even like some diehard Duke fans or whatever, I don't think they even saw it coming.
So the Giants selected at 6, and then they also selected at 17, correct?
That is true.
So they could have selected, had they been thinking, I can't imagine that anybody else would have plucked up Daniel Jones. So they could have gotten a better player. They could have got a player who was valued at 6 and still gotten Daniel Jones at 17.
Yeah, I mean, unless someone between 6 and 17 picked Daniel Jones, but I see what you're saying. I mean, I'm shocked.
Yeah, I am too. I am too.
Even the people, some of your fellow colleagues at ESPN, they had a couple of shows going on this morning, and they were commenting all over that network about how, Haskins was, I guess he was slightly upset. I mean, I would be upset if I was Haskins too, but how, I mean, just Giants fans in general are upset and shocked and shell-shocked.
Am I upset?
I mean, there's no guarantee. No, I'm not saying you're upset.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Giants fans are upset.
Gotcha.
No. I mean, I would hope that maybe, I mean, being a diehard Ohio State fan, I guess you'd probably support Dwayne Haskins.
Sure. I would love to see him have a nice career. Yeah, but I really don't care where he's drafted or where he goes. It makes no difference to me, but I would like to see the kid succeed.
Absolutely. And so, I don't think it's like a bad draft for Haskins, but I don't think that anyone kind of saw it coming. And I still don't think Daniel Jones is going to see any playing time for the next year, maybe at least 2 years, at least until Eli Manning goes. But who knows, man? I mean, it's all politics too, right? You don't control this.
So,
speaking of which, the last question.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to make a point about Daniel Jones and the selection of Jones to the Giants. So I'm going to make one pro-Giants statement, and I'm going to make one anti-Giants statement. So the first one would be, they are likening this situation with Eli Manning and Daniel Jones to Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. So if Daniel Jones sits for 3 years while Eli Manning finishes his career and he turns out to be Aaron Rodgers, then kudos to the New York Giants. They are geniuses. And even if it had to wait for 3 to 4 years, they have selected one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. So if they are that smart and have scouted that well to determine that Daniel Jones is the next Aaron Rodgers, and it works out that well, Aaron Rodgers, who I think may have the best skill set of any quarterback that's ever played, then great. The difference between this situation and that situation is the Green Bay Packers were on the cusp of a Super Bowl. They were one of the 3 best teams in the NFL at that point, and they could afford to ignore other positions. They went 13-3 and played in an NFC championship game the year before Brett Favre left. The New York Giants are a mess. They're one of the worst teams in the NFL. So probably one of the worst 5 or 6 teams in the NFL. So they need a lot of help. And really, it's not a luxury for them to have a quarterback sit for 3 years and not produce.
Personally, don't think Haskins would have sat for 3 years. I think he's too good of a player to sit down for 3 years. I think that at most you sit him down for 1 or 2 years, mostly just 1. Otherwise, he might get traded somewhere else. He might seek free agency somewhere.
Agreed.
So the other interesting point I want to make on Haskins before I ask my last question is that Haskins, I think, is going to be the starter, or at least compete to be the starter or backup at Washington. Obviously, Colt McCoy, diehard Texas fan here, we want the best for him, and I think he may give a run at the Redskins job this come season, but realistically, he's not even on the practice squad right now. He's not even practicing. He's still recovering from injury. Mm-hmm. So I do believe that the Redskins drafted Haskins because they want him to see some playing time this coming year. Whether he's going to be the actual starter or not, that's the big question. I don't think, he has to compete for that job. He may win it. He may not. It depends on what the Redskins coach and coaching staff think. So I definitely think that Haskins would have had more playing time at the Redskins in his first few years than the Giants, which a lot of people don't see. But, it's going to be interesting to see how Haskins' quarterback situation plays out at the Redskins. The Redskins haven't had a stable quarterback in years. So I think that
Kirk Cousins.
Opportunity for Haskins.
It's been a couple.
True, but it's been a long time.
What's it been, like 2 years, 3 years since Kirk Cousins left?
It's a reasonable amount of time for the average NFL fan to keep their attention span going.
Okay, all right.
But but yes, I see your point. They definitely have had some great quarterbacks in the past, and I completely agree with what you're saying.
I was just mentioning one. He's not a Hall of Famer exactly. He's just a capable quarterback.
That's true. And didn't they have RG3 a long time ago? He didn't have a successful career, I know.
Wow. Deeper rot. When I talk to you and you throw out terms like a long time ago, it seems to me like RG3 just got drafted yesterday. That was in the that was in the Andrew Luck draft. So that was 2012. So that was 7 years ago now. So RG3, yes, was the offensive rookie of the year in the NFL, had a great first season. And then he ripped up his knee, and that took up his mobility. Plus, they had to compare what RG3 faced his first 2 years in the NFL versus Andrew Luck. Basically, RG3, they watered down the offense so he could execute it. He basically had one look and one read and throw it away or run. And Andrew Luck was basically given a Peyton Manning offense and told, you've got the keys and you're going to have to, we believe in your acumen and your intelligence, and you're running the show right out of the gate.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, I mean, you brought up, the long time ago, RG3 thing. I mean, the only reason I brought him up was because he was a Heisman winner from the Big 12. He went
Yes.
to Baylor, so you obviously know my love for the Big 12 as well. But yeah, man, the last question I have for you and let other callers come online is, what is your thoughts for tomorrow's draft? What do you think are some of the big names do you think that are going to be drafted tomorrow?
Oh boy, again, I'm not a draft guy. I love watching the draft. I don't prepare for the draft. So I would just have to scan the big names and the big teams, who's still out there. Boy.
Not any names that pop up for you, I guess.
Yeah, I thought of about 8 or 10 as soon as you said that, and I'm thinking, and they've all been drafted thus far. Bryce Love, it's going to be interesting to see who plucks him up, because I think he's a very one-dimensional back, a guy that's not a good pass protector. He didn't catch that many passes at Stanford, but of course he's an extremely explosive player. He had injuries. He was a superstar at that level. Is that going to translate? I don't think he has the skill set and can't be compared to his predecessor, Christian McCaffrey, who's a tremendous NFL player. So Bryce Love comes to mind as an interesting selection for day 3.
Yeah. Okay. Also, do you think the draft has any implication on recruiting classes in college? Do you think that these kids will look at these NFL players that are drafted and be like, I don't want to attend this college because nobody from this particular school got drafted, or nobody at this particular position at this school got drafted?
I would have to think there's some influence there. There are positions that just seem to have been NFL factory lines over the past few years. Ohio State defensive back comes to mind. That's especially if there's a long-standing positional coach there that's known for developing, and there being a pipeline there. I don't think it's a huge factor, but I'm not going to discount that there's not a factor there that kids wouldn't necessarily. Can we think of a program that doesn't necessarily win at the very highest level in college, but produces probably more NFL players than their winning would suggest? Would that be LSU in recent years? If you just took LSU, I think LSU has a certain cachet with the typical college football fan because their recruiting is so high and they produce so many NFL players. But in the middle, LSU has churned out a lot of 3 and 4 loss seasons since 2011. They've churned out nothing but 3 and 4 loss seasons. I don't think that they've made it through a season since 2011 when they lost the BCS championship game to Alabama with less than 3 losses in a season. I can almost guarantee that. But they recruit in the top 5 to 10, and they churn out as many NFL players as just about anybody else. And I think they're known for that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I do believe that LSU has a very, very elite pedigree when it comes to NFL relationships. And, I guess I don't know what LSU's worst season has been this time, but I think they had a very bad year.
It's like 8 and 5. I think we're going to hear here in just a second exactly what I've explained. So since 2011, when they lost the national championship game, again, my guarantee was that LSU has not made it through a season without less than 3 losses. Okay. 10 and 3, 10 and 3, 8 and 5, 9 and 3, 8 and 4, 9 and 4, 10 and 3. Those are the LSU seasons since the BCS championship game in 2011.
Yeah, and they still had several, I believe, first round or second round players being drafted in their worst year.
Absolutely.
So I mean, I don't think it's one of those LSU is a brand name when it comes to college football and recruiting and even the NFL. I think there's several.
All right, Deeper Rod, I vowed no 20-minute phone calls. I probably shouldn't even go with 10-minute phone calls. We're sitting at 20, and I've got 3 other people waiting. So I appreciate the phone call, sir.
Yes, absolutely.
Have a great night.
Cheers. Bye.
All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Let's get this straight first. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hi, Mark. This is Anthony.
So, Anthony, if you could please turn down your phone or internet, whatever you've got on in the background, because I can hear myself.
I was watching you.
There you go.
Yeah.
How you doing tonight?
Watching you on YouTube. I'm doing fine. I have a question, actually. What's your grade on the Josh Rosen trade for the Dolphins? We basically traded him for a end of the second round pick, like a pick 63 for a top 10 pick last year.
There you go.
But what do you? And do you like the Christian Wilkins pick in the first round, or do you think we should trade it down for him?
So you're a Dolphins fan?
Yes, I'm a Dolphins fan.
All right. So my thoughts on Josh Rosen is that Josh Rosen has a traditional NFL quarterback skill set. The game is changing so much. It just appears as though these schools are churning out these more athletic quarterbacks that are just as gifted throwing the ball downfield and have dynamic skill sets in the running game as well. And you limit yourself as the game is evolving and changing by not having a mobile quarterback. And Josh Rosen is just that. He's not completely immobile. He's not like Vinny Testaverde at 40 years old, but he's not a mobile quarterback by comparison. Just in terms of, pardon me?
I have a question. When it comes to the term mobile quarterback, do they mean that they rely on scrambling a lot, or they can just move around in the pocket? Because when you look at Tom Brady, he's mobile in the pocket to where he can manipulate the pocket around him.
Sure.
But he doesn't scramble. What's his name? Aaron Rodgers is a perfect example. He's not a scrambler, but he manipulates the pocket around him to be able to get throwing lanes and stuff like that.
Okay. Your point is well taken, but do not put Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady in the same category when it comes to mobility. Yes, Aaron Rodgers is not looking to run around like a fool like Michael Vick, but there's no comparison between the athleticism of Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers can elude a rush. He can beat defenders downfield. He does run for first downs and beats a defense. And they've got to account for Aaron Rodgers. If the rush doesn't contain, if they leave a gap, an opening, he's going to take advantage of it. That's not what he wants to do, and he certainly eludes the pocket and makes some of the most ridiculous throws you will see downfield off one leg and on a full sprint. That's not a Tom Brady strength. So there is a difference in mobility, but it's a point well taken when you talk about a quarterback who is able to shift around in the pocket, climb the pocket, has quick feet, doesn't run fast, but obviously it's difficult to knock Tom Brady's game in any way, shape, or form. So he's been very adept at being quick and agile inside the pocket. Yes.
And what's your opinion on Michael Dieter, the guy we drafted in the third round, the offensive lineman?
From Wisconsin.
Wisconsin.
Yes. I've heard only good things about Michael Dieter. So some people believe in the pipeline that some positions at certain schools have built. And one of the first ones that come to mind, of course, is offensive line at Wisconsin. So most of those players, the center with the Dallas Cowboys, I can't come up with his name right now, but he's one of the best.
Tyler Frederick.
Yes, thank you. Is an exceptional player, obviously. And there's just been a number of him. Well, sure, Joe Thomas is going to be in the Hall of Fame. He's one of the great players in the history of the league at tackle, despite playing for a deplorable franchise. So I can't imagine that you missed it there. I heard nothing but good things about Michael Dieter. Now, as I mentioned off the top, when we watch games, of course, we're not focused on line play, but I watch Wisconsin play 7 or 8 times every year. And the offensive line is always tremendous. They had a down year this past year by comparison, by their standards. I do want to get back to your point about Josh Rosen being selected or being worth a second-round pick, only 1 year removed from being a top 10 selection in the draft. And that's just kind of how it works. Once players' draft picks are highly valued, and once a player, unless he's a superstar, and then, of course, the team's not looking to unload him, it's almost like new cars. Once you drive them off the lot, they diminish in value considerably. You buy a car for $20,000, you drive it around for a month, and it's worth like $14,000. It seems to be the same when it comes to draft picks. They're worth more than most players.
And honestly, with Josh Rosen, you can't really. I don't know what the problem was. You can't really blame him. That offensive line for freaking Arizona was horrible.
Yes,
so
it was.
You can't blame his play.
Absolutely.
The play on him, it was the offensive line that was totally bad, totally horrible. And honestly, when you say pipeline to the NFL when it comes to positions, the perfect example is Miami with tight ends. You went with tight ends with Jeremy Shockey, Greg Olsen, David Njoku, and stuff like that, and all the tight ends that we're going to be producing in the next 2 years in the draft. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. So I don't want to make that statement, and I don't think it's generational, meaning just because Penn State produced great running backs in the 1970s that they're producing great running backs, and that should sway anybody's opinion or evaluation of, let's say, Miles Sanders to select him in the NFL draft. The difference in that comparison versus Wisconsin is we're talking about continuity. We're talking about the same position coach, the same program, the players more recently. So there's a continuity. It's just, yeah, and it's just not legacy. That has nothing to do. Of course, Penn State football in the 1970s producing Lydell Mitchell and Franco Harris and John Cappelletti at running back has nothing to do with what they're doing now. There is no, except for them wearing the same jerseys that say Penn State, there's no correlation. There's no connection to those. And so when you bring up Jeremy Shockey, I think that's going back a bit far. But certainly the current Miami program has produced quality tight ends too.
Yeah, Greg Olsen. I'm saying he's more recent. He
But again, is there any connection to what they're doing offensively at Miami right now? See, do you understand the point I'm making? The continuity at Wisconsin has to do with the same head coach, offensive line coach program, but there's no connection to what Greg Olsen did at Miami and what's going on at Miami right now.
And do you think with when it comes to O-line, Alabama's going to be catching up to Wisconsin developing a lot of O-line into the NFL?
Hasn't Alabama already caught up to Wisconsin and passed Wisconsin? I would guess. With
offensive linemen drafted in the NFL?
Yeah, I believe they have. Doesn't Alabama? Oh my goodness! There's a Womack and a Williams and every year they have. Oh my goodness! If we went through the Alabama NFL draft picks every year and offensive linemen, I'd bet a dime or two that Alabama's had more NFL draft selections at offensive line than Wisconsin has.
Even though they have more consistent. What I mean by more, like perfect example is Joe Thomas. He's going to be a future Hall of Famer.
Sure.
That's why I'm talking about, like, consistency.
You're talking about one guy.
And I'm not saying Dieter or anybody. They have the potential to be future Hall of Famers, but what I'm saying, they have a track record of producing these more high-level offensive linemen than Alabama. Alabama was more recent, is what I'm saying. I'm talking about, like, overall, like, throughout the 2000s, I'm saying you would hear more Wisconsin linemen in the draft than Alabama. Alabama's more recent, like within like the past maybe 9 years, maybe.
Okay.
When it comes to offensive line.
So, how far back would you like to go in counting Wisconsin offensive linemen drafted in the NFL versus Alabama?
The 2000.
You want to go since 2000, even though my point is that what was going on in 2000 at either program really has nothing to do with what's going on right now and whether that positional group should be trusted by an NFL general manager. But we'll still count it since 2000. I'll play along. So since 2000,
yeah,
here we go. Wisconsin. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I can get that pop up off there, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 drafted, including Dieter today. 19 since 2000. That's the Wisconsin count for offensive linemen drafted. Okay. Alabama, 19 for Wisconsin. I would actually go since the Nick Saban era myself, but we'll go back to 2000. I may not win this argument going back to 2000, but we'll see. All right, since 2000 for Alabama, give me just a second. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 to 18, Wisconsin.
So they're leading by 1.
So it really doesn't matter. It's basically a wash.
Okay.
And again, my point is that what was going on in the year 2000 has nothing to do with these positional groups now and how well they're coached to project toward the NFL.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for your answering my call, Mark. And
absolutely.
Have a good week.
Yeah, I appreciate you watching. Thanks for the phone call. All right. So hopefully I clarified that. When there is a reputation that a particular position at a particular school has, some of it's based on just all-time legacy that really has nothing to do with what's going on now. But there are other circumstances in which it still is relevant today because the coaching and the program is still intact. Hopefully that made sense. All right, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line? Uh-oh, hang on just a second. We got a little issue with the speaker. Here we go. Start again, please. Who was that?
Oh, this is Eli, and I'm calling because I'm a huge Redskins fan. And
okay.
One thing I wanted to say is that I was really pumped about our first round. Like
I bet.
Dwayne Haskins. You get Dwayne Haskins, who, in my opinion, I think is actually the best quarterback in the draft. Like, I have him ranked over Kyler Murray.
So do you do this on a regular basis, rate players? And I'm not saying that in any kind of mocking way at all. I'm serious. So when you say you rated them.
Well, focusing on what we need, and obviously being the fact that we needed a quarterback desperately. So I was kind of thinking, okay, so I was ranking like just maybe the very top ones. Like, so I was thinking, so I had his Haskins number 1. I had Murray number 2, and then I guess Daniel Jones was number 3. But I was just laughing at the Giants. I was like, what are they doing?
Yeah, it just doesn't seem to make sense. Now, if their scouting's accurate and Daniel Jones turns out to be the next top 5 level quarterback in the NFL, then that's what they need. If you're drafting a quarterback roughly in the top 5 at the draft, I know they were at number 6, but roughly in that area, then he needs to turn out to be an elite quarterback. He at least needs to turn out to be a guy that plays for 10 or 12 years, takes you to the playoffs most of the time, and hopefully at some point wins a ring. Joe Flacco. Where was Joe Flacco drafted? He was a first rounder. I would guess he was in the mid first round, like around 15. That would be a good example of a guy that played for the Ravens. They almost went to the playoffs every year he was there. Of course, he won a Super Bowl MVP, was by no means one of the elite quarterbacks in the league, but a very good, like, top 10 to 12 quarterback at his best.
Yeah, I mean, I like Daniel Jones. If they had taken him at number 17, that probably would have been a good pick, because obviously Eli Manning pretty much washed up, and they definitely do need someone to replace him. I thought they should have taken I thought they should have either gone with Haskins there or taken Josh Allen. Like Josh Allen, the Jaguars, I think, got a steal.
Absolutely.
8-7, and then and Montez Sweat, I actually considered him a top 10 player overall, and I know he had that. And considering the reports that was just a misdiagnosis, it's like, I think the Redskins, we gave up 2 second-round picks to move back into the first round and get him, but since we also needed an edge rusher, I would take that any day of the week.
I agree. I think Josh Allen's going to be a tremendous player in the NFL. And again, the point I made to the previous caller was I think that the Giants could have gotten more value by selecting the best player regardless of position, and it was probably Josh Allen at that point. And then still most likely, I know that there would have been a risk there, but they would have gotten either Daniel Jones or Dwayne Haskins at number 17, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you have the Dolphins, Broncos, and Bengals, aside from the Redskins, that they probably were worried about, since those teams need quarterbacks too. So, like, because I remember when Haskins was falling, I was most worried about Miami. Of course, they just traded for Rosen today, but he didn't. But obviously, there's no news to them. So I was like, please don't take Haskins, Miami. I want him.
Yeah, you sure got him. And it's going to be fascinating because, as I mentioned off the top of the show, I don't think there's anything in the draft that is as much of a long-lasting storyline as quarterback classes, and making the comparison between which teams blew it, which teams made just the obvious choice that turned out like a Peyton Manning at number 1, and which teams found somebody in as a diamond in the rough, which of course Tom Brady is the classic example, and Joe Montana was also a 3rd-round pick. But forever, Daniel Jones and Dwayne Haskins, those two in particular, are going to be linked. Who did the Giants?
The same division.
Sure, they're in the same division. They're going to play twice a year. That's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, and I mean, well, and of course, in today's NFL, it's like, how are you going to compete for a Super Bowl if you don't have a good quarterback? I mean, maybe you don't. Maybe it's not always a super elite one, but like a Aaron Rodgers or a Tom Brady. I mean, you mentioned Joe Flacco, and then Brad Johnson once won a Super Bowl. I remember. And
Trent Dilfer.
Trent Dilfer won one, but they had Ravens also had the greatest defense
of
all time that year. That's a huge exception. But
Brad Johnson still had a great defense as well.
Yeah, but so I mean, you may not always, but you at least have to be one of the better ones to have a good chance. And it's like, I mean, the Redskins aren't winning a Super Bowl with Case Keenum or Colt McCoy as their quarterback. Like, it just isn't going to happen.
No.
And I'm not saying that Dwayne Haskins will lead us to a Super Bowl, but at least gives us that chance that if he does pan out, then and maybe we continue to build around. Like, wide receiver is another position I feel like we really need too. So, and we've got some things I like and some things that we definitely need to make improvements on.
Yeah. So what parts of your team do you want to see get shored up on the final day in rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7?
Wide receivers, I'd say wide receiver, and we need a free safety. Those are, and a left guard too. Like, I know we took Terry McLaurin from Ohio State with our 3rd round pick.
Yeah, it's that's right. So Dwayne Haskins at least has a comfort level there, and Terry McLaurin, who I don't know if you heard much of the scouting report on him, but watching a lot of Ohio State football, you know, he's not an elite receiver, but he's a very, very hard worker. He's a very good special teams player, and he's a willing blocker, very much so.
Okay. So it sounds like he's a pretty good character guy. I mean, it seems
Yes.
like he should at least see the field. I mean, obviously special teams is a third of the game, so if they can contribute there, that's a plus. And then, I mean, apparently he has a lot of speed, so I don't know if he'd be a top 3 receiver yet as a rookie, but I'm sure Jay Gruden will probably at least have some 4 wide receiver sets and send him out on some deep routes or something. He'll definitely see the field and at least make some sort of an impact as a 3rd round pick, which, I mean, I guess I'll take it.
All right, good stuff. Appreciate the call.
All right, thank you.
We'll talk to you soon. All right, NFL draft. We ran down the 2nd round, and we can certainly go down the 3rd as we wait for our next caller. Unless I really want to dive in all this political rhetoric, I should probably have you guys sign something that says any non-college football related comments on the super chat equals a $1 gift to the Mark Rogers TV College Voice of College Football Fund to keep the channel running. Dennis, good to see you. Let's check out the big draft tracker as we've run down the 2nd round. Let's go to round number 3. All right. Cardinals selected number 1 in the 3rd round, as they did the first 2 rounds. Zach Allen, defensive end out of Boston College. We've commented on his play a number of times throughout the years at Boston College. And I think the one school in the Power 5 that may surprise people in this NFL draft would be Boston College, especially when they are typically the lowest rated recruiting class year to year in the ACC. Their rival would be Duke and Syracuse and Wake Forest for that distinction. But Boston College recruiting classes are typically in the 55 to 65 range, and they have churned out NFL players. So the development there has been very good. After Zach Allen, you had Deontay Johnson, the wide receiver from Toledo, who went to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who the commentators mentioned as being the best route runner possibly in the draft. And of course, again, me being a Power 5 football guy that loves to watch the MAC and the other group of 5 when I can, but focused on the Power 5, I can't really give much analysis on Deontay Johnson playing at Toledo. I probably saw him play 3 or 4 times and just didn't even know it. He goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jalen Hurd, interesting player in the same backfield originally as Alvin Kamara, and actually shared carries as a running back at Tennessee and made a very astute move by switching to wide receiver when he transferred to Baylor and really converting his skills to the outside and making himself a polished wide receiver. Jalen Hurd goes to San Francisco from the Baylor Bears at pick number 2 in the pick number 3 in the 3rd round. We got a call coming in. And of course, what do you need to do? You need to like the video. So like the live stream, of course, comment, subscribe, and share the videos out there on social media and let people know that we are here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So if people ask me from time to time, what can we do to help? Those are the things that you can do that will not cost you a cent. Like the videos, share the videos, and let people know that we're here. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's MTD Sports.
There he is. What's going on?
Hey, I basically want to talk to you about the quarterbacks in this draft. Basically,
okay.
My first, a few questions. Here's my first question. Name every quarterback in the draft that's better than Daniel Jones, in your opinion?
Kyler Murray, Dwayne Haskins, and Drew Lock.
You don't think Will Greer is?
Okay, that's a great great question. So we had Rick Saratella from the NFL Draft Bible on a few weeks ago, and he did not even mention Will Grier. And I brought up Will Grier because to watch the two guys play in college, a couple things have to be taken into consideration. Daniel Jones is more mobile than Will Grier, number one. Number two, that the West Virginia offense had more prolific playmakers on the outside, and therefore it was easier for Will Grier to look good. And then thirdly, as I understand it, the reason that Rick didn't mention Will Grier, because I brought him up, I said, what about Will Grier? He said he just performed horribly at all the various combines and Senior Bowl practices after the season. But to watch the guys play, yes, absolutely. Will Grier, it brought to mind watching his game tape. You know, college football season's been over for a little while, and I tend to forget. But watching his game tape made me fall in love with the guy all over again. And I thought, man, this guy can just lace it right in there, thread the needle. He throws a beautiful deep ball and puts it right on the money versus the Daniel Jones highlights that seem pretty pedestrian, throwing to guys that were wide open down the seam, not difficult throws. Yeah, Will Grier, exceptional quarterback. Yes. Those three guys, based on just my eye test, not being a scout or a coach, Grier, Haskins, and Locke better than Jones, and arguably Ryan Finley as well, although he's not as mobile.
Okay. So you kind of agree with me on the fact that Daniel Jones was nowhere close to the second best quarterback in that draft.
Did we finally agree on something?
I know. It's great.
Very nice. Good stuff.
Yeah,
I do agree. And maybe the Giants will make us all look like fools, and maybe they know something that the rest of us don't. But I was mystified by that selection.
Yeah, I heard they were going to do it, and then I just couldn't believe it. And then they actually did it, and I was like, man, the Giants just made a big mistake. And the funny thing about the whole thing is that Dwayne Haskins, he's on the Redskins in the same division, so.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch it play out over the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think Dwayne Haskins is going to be starting week 1 next year for the Redskins anyways.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Because, unlike the other guy, Daniel Jones, I don't think he will. But I do want to say this, and I know you're not the biggest NFL guy, but I'm kind of getting in a debate on the comments section about the Panthers. I think Cam Newton's days in Carolina are numbered.
Okay. I always like to have people justify and back up their comments. So what is your reasoning?
Well, Cam, he's been pretty banged up the past 2 or 3 years.
Sure.
They just drafted Will Grier. There was talks about the Carolina Panthers before the draft saying they might just sit out Cam the whole year because he's injured for that arm injury that Andrew Luck had.
Well, to watch him throw after he was injured, and then I don't know how much time he missed, but it wasn't a whole lot. Then he came back. To watch him near the end of the season, I didn't know why he was playing. They were knocked out of the playoff race with about 2 weeks, I would guess, about 2 weeks left in the season, and he looked like he was in excruciating pain. But on top of that, he could not make the throws that he typically is able to make. And the thing with Cam Newton is he is used to having an elite arm. Therefore, his mechanics aren't the best. He throws off platform a lot when he doesn't have to. He throws off his back foot. He throws falling away. He does all these things because he's got a great arm, and he did not develop good habits in the passing game, delivering the football, and now it may cost him a little bit or a lot.
Yeah, but he has, I think they say he has like a very similar or the same injury as Andrew Luck had. So that's why I think they might move on from Cam, because if they're talking about sitting out Cam the whole year and Will Grier lights it up, that's going to be a conversation down the road that's going to be debated and everything. So that's where I'm at with the Carolina Panthers. I think his days might be numbered. But
okay,
that's
I can follow your reasoning on that.
And I think Cam Newton's a great quarterback and everything, but like I think last year there was a point that I don't think he could have thrown the ball more than 20 yards down the field.
No,
I think
that's what I'm saying. The last few weeks of the season,
yeah.
I watched him play, and I specifically just the ball was fluttering out of his hand, and it was awful.
There was one game on prime time. I forgot who they were playing. He just looked awful. Like it was so bad. But you were bringing up Joe Flacco, Joe Fluco, whatever you want to call him.
I would call him Flacco because that's his name. Is there an issue with Joe Flacco, or are people down on Joe Flacco? What's the problem?
Well, I'm from Maryland, so like I'm a Tennessee Titans fan, but I do cheer for the Ravens a little bit. And
whoa. You root? Okay, you're from Maryland. You root for the Titans. How did that start?
Well, I'm in elementary school. Everybody was either you're a Ravens fan, a Redskins fan, an Eagles fan,
sure,
or a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and there was always like a few like Dolphins and Giants fans.
Okay.
So I was like, you know what, I want to be different, so I just rolled with the Titans.
Okay. But you kind of like the Ravens. Okay. All right.
I pulled them a little bit just because of the hometown team, but I mean, he would have like one game that he was just like outstanding, and then the next like 4 games he was very pedestrian. So Skip Bayless on FS1, he came up with the name back when he was with ESPN, Joe Fluco, and it just stuck with me when he came up with that. So I've rolled with that ever since.
Skip is a clever one.
Yeah. So that's why I call him Joe Fluco, because it just stuck. But you said he was drafted. He was drafted with the 25th overall pick.
25th. Okay.
Yeah, you were saying like the mid-teens. It was actually in the 20s.
Yeah, whatever. So, it was in the first round. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ravens made the right moves with that, by the way. Letting him go.
They won a Super Bowl. They won a Super Bowl with a guy, and they made the playoffs practically every year he was there.
Yeah.
So I think it was a good draft selection.
It was a good draft selection, but after he got his money the year after the Super Bowl,
sure,
the Ravens, I think, only made the playoffs twice, and it was a lot of I don't want to say the term, but it was a lot of half-assing out there from Flacco, whatever you want to call him.
I would call him Flacco. But anyway, I'm not understanding Skip Bayless's, other than it makes sense with the alliteration. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't understand the whole Fluco. What did he ever do that was a fluke? I'm not understanding that. But Skip Bayless hasn't made a whole lot of sense for years. I used to really like Skip Bayless. There was a time when I thought he made a whole lot of sense. Now I just think he says things just to cause a ruckus and says some pretty asinine things.
I mean, Stephen A. calls him that as well. So Skip's not the only one. Skip just came up with it.
I've got to stop my analysis on commentators right there. As soon as you bring up Stephen A. Smith, I could say some things there, but I'm not allowed.
I like Stephen A. though. I like Stephen A. a lot. So, but you got Stephen A., so I'll call him that as well. So, I mean, it's just a thing that just stuck with me. I'll call him Flacco just for you, Mark, but, I mean, it's just a thing that stuck with me.
I can't anticipate us having too many Joe Flacco conversations in our future, but certainly you are allowed and justified based on your opinion as an American, and have a free speech to call him whatever you want on this show. You can call anybody whatever you want, as long as it's not some obscenity. You can call anybody whatever you want.
Yeah, but basically, I just want to get your opinion on how many quarterbacks you think are better than Daniel Jones in the draft.
Yeah,
I think that's going to cost the New York Giants. I think it's going to set them back 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I'm at 4 and maybe 5.
Yeah,
4 for sure.
Yeah, definitely 4.
I'm trying to think what other quarterbacks are out there besides Finley. There's a few other ones. Who else is out there?
Well, Jake Browning.
Oh, yeah. Not Jake Browning. I have a lot of respect for Jake Browning. I thought he led the offense well and did about as well as his skills would allow, but I don't think he has a big enough arm to play in the NFL as a starter.
I just don't think I never really believed in Jake Browning. I always thought he was very pedestrian up there in Washington. And then another quarterback, Jared Stidham, is another guy that.
Now, he's got a big arm.
I mean, I don't know if he like that's Stidham and Jones are probably at the same level, in my opinion.
They're different kind of players, but I get it. Sure.
Like I don't think either one will win your Super Bowl. That's what I'm trying.
Probably not. There's not a whole lot of guys that do win Super Bowls when it comes right down to it.
Yeah, I think Drew Lock and Will Greer. I think those two, they have the chance to because of their big arms. I think they have the chance to.
Now, see, here's a great question, MCD for. I always screw up your name, but anyway, I always mess up on the placement of the 4. So anyway, if I ran a poll, unfortunately, it could not be answered for years and years to come, but it would be interesting to know, of course, right now, if any quarterbacks that are selected in this draft are going to win a Super Bowl. My guess is no. That would be my guess, that none of them are going to win a Super Bowl.
Okay.
Just a guess.
So, okay. Yeah, I mean, I thought last year the quarterback talent in last year's draft was a lot better than this one. So, I thought personally, I think only one quarterback should have went in this first round in this year's draft, and that was Dwayne Haskins.
So you're not sold on Kyler Murray running around in the NFL and throwing over the offensive line. Okay.
Kyle Murray is like a sideshow. Cliff Kingsbury, he'll be out of Arizona in 3 years with Kyle Murray.
That I can agree with.
I think it was a terrible hire to begin with, and
yes,
it's just gone. I mean, they do have some talent though. They did well in free agency, in my opinion. They got 12 Suggs, and they still have Larry Fitzgerald. I know he's been down there forever in the desert, but they could win a few games, but they're in a tough division. I just don't see it.
I love we've got quite the political conversation going here.
I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah, I hate it too, to a certain extent. It's not for the live chat here, but that's fine. You guys can talk about whatever. Again, as long as people are treated with respect, and you guys can talk about whatever you want. But yeah, boy, I would have a lot to say about this stuff. Josh Allen, somebody's defending Josh Allen as a good quarterback. D. Rev Lee is.
I'll say this about Josh Allen. I think Buffalo made the right selection there. I do. He has a big arm. I think Buffalo can make the playoffs this upcoming year. And I know Josh Allen. He only played at a Group of 5 school, and I'll admit I wasn't sold on him because of that. Because he only went, I think, 8-5 with Wyoming.
Yeah.
Yeah, he went. So I wasn't sold on him since he played for a Group of 5 school, but he proved me wrong. He definitely showed a lot of flashes last year, so definitely someone that I think could be an NFL starter for years to come up there in Buffalo.
Okay, so we've got a guy in the live chat that's backing you up on this old Flacco thing. We've got JR on the line, and if you can hang with me for just a second, MCD, I got to do this because I haven't seen a JR's handle in the chat before. So, welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Thanks for joining, and I hope you're able to let us know who you root for and how long you've been watching. So, JR makes the mention here that leading the Ravens to the Super Bowl was a fluke, which clearly which clearly where he gets his name from. Okay, JR, I would love for you to explain why that was a fluke. I could give you easily 10 quarterback performances during Super Bowl winning seasons that were more of a fluke than Joe Flacco. Trent Dilfer, Brad Johnson, David Woodley, on and on down the line, Earl Morrall, and others that were marginal quarterbacks and did not have good seasons. Joe Flacco, say what you will about his other performances during other seasons, had an exceptional season, outdueled a 55 touchdown year out of Peyton Manning, or maybe that was the year prior to. But anyway, Denver was the team that was supposed to win the Super Bowl. And Joe Flacco, they went on the road and won 3 games. They beat the Patriots. They beat the Broncos. That was absolutely no fluke. Maybe he played out of his mind. You could say that, but it certainly wasn't a fluke.
Well, if you look at QBR, I'll defend JR a little bit.
Okay.
If you look at the QBR in the regular season games,
yeah.
The reason why he might be alluding to that as a fluke is because Joe Flacco has posted some of the worst QBRs scores ever in some regular season games.
We're talking about his Super Bowl season.
Yeah, that season they played the Broncos also in the regular season in Baltimore.
Okay.
And I think at the time he posted the worst QBR ever. But he had like 3 or 4 really bad games before the playoffs that year.
So Peyton Manning had like a 5 for 17 performance the last week of the regular season, the year they won the Super Bowl in Denver. That had nothing to do with what he did in the playoffs. So Joe Flacco, his playoff run that particular season, what year was that? 2012?
Yeah, 2012 season, correct.
All right. So let's see. Playoffs. First game, 12 for 23, 282 yards, 2 TDs, no picks. Second game, 18 for 34, 331 through the air, 3 TDs, no picks. Against the Patriots in the AFC Championship game, 21 of 36, 240 through the air, 3 TDs, no picks. Super Bowl versus San Francisco, 22 for 33, 267 through the air, 3 touchdowns, no picks. 11 touchdowns, no interceptions for 4 playoff games, 2 of them on the road against 2 huge favorites. I'm not understanding the fluke there. He played 4 exceptional games.
Right there, he just balled out, Mark. He just balled out.
Sure. Absolutely he did.
He got paid.
That's what he did.
He got paid after that season of a 6-year, $120 million contract.
I'm not discounting any of that. That happens in sports all the time, and I don't agree with it. He's not worth it. But that's the Baltimore Ravens issue. That's not Joe Flacco's issue. Joe Flacco, yes, he was supported by a good team, but if he doesn't ball out like that, they probably don't win the Super Bowl. If anything, it's clutch. He outplayed himself. He played better than he typically does when it mattered the most.
And
I'm going to start calling him Joe Clutch. That's what I'm going to start calling him. Joe Clutch.
Okay. I'd like you please watch his games this year because he's going to be starting over Drew Lock.
I don't need to see anything else out of Joe Flacco. If he never throws another touchdown in his career, that has nothing to do with the point I'm trying to make here. I'm not saying Joe Flacco is a great quarterback. I'm saying he was a good quarterback. He was a top 10 to 12 quarterback for about a 5-year span.
I agree.
Something in that range.
The nickname, I think, primarily came after the Super Bowl run. But I think it came after the Super Bowl run, starting like in 2014 or whatever. That's where I think that name came from.
He's He's won 96 games. He lost 67, so he's got a high winning percentage. But, of course, that's a team statistic. He's got 212 career touchdown passes against 136 career interceptions. That's not a great ratio, but it's decent.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll say this: Ravens fans, they'll always thank Flacco for the Super Bowl run and the great seasons he gave with the high winning percentage. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying Ravens fans, but I mean, if you watch the Ravens on a week to week basis, it was time for them to move on. That's what I think. I mean, and we wish him Ravens fans. They wish him the best in Denver. It looks like Drew Lock is going to be waiting for his turn, so he might only last in Denver for a year or two, if that. But I'm sure Ravens fans, they're excited about Lamar Jackson. RG3 is the backup, so hopefully.
Can we liken this to a certain extent to what Eli Manning did with the Giants, but he did it twice? He didn't have great regular seasons, but he had two tremendous all-time Super Bowl runs with great performances week after week after week, and is the only quarterback in the history of the Super Bowl. You know, Tom Brady's done it where he only had to stop and get the ball to the 30-yard line to kick a field goal. That's a much different deal than when you have to score a touchdown. And Eli Manning twice scored a touchdown when he had the ball in his hands and had to win a Super Bowl.
I'll say this: Eli Manning, I don't know how he did it for those two Super Bowl runs, but it's time for the Giants to move on from him as well. I mean, the Giants haven't been in the postseason. I think after that second Super Bowl run, I think they only made the postseason, I want to say only once, and they lost to the Packers in Lambeau. So, I mean, and then he's on his third coach since the Super Bowl run as well.
Sure.
So.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate the call.
Mm-hmm.
You have a good night.
You too.
All right. I think things are about winding up here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Thanks so much for jumping on the line for the NFL Draft Day 2 instant analysis. Thanks for the contributions in the live chat. And otherwise, we appreciate it. But just a few hanging on the line here at 1:15 in the morning Eastern time. So thanks so much again. We shall be back here very soon. That could possibly be tomorrow. I will send out the notification and let you know. Otherwise, I've got to also lock in on some spring games. There's a final batch of college football spring games with Colorado being requested of me for analysis. I got to keep that in mind, or else I'm going to forget that, and it's going to be August. I'm going to remember, or somebody that's requested it's going to remind me that I blew off the Colorado spring game, and I vowed to meet that request. So thank you so much for joining, and we will see you soon, and enjoy the NFL Draft Day 3, rounds 4, 5, and 6, and also round number 7. And meanwhile, like, subscribe, share the videos, do all those good things, and like the videos as well. We will see you soon.